Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk to people from all walks of the publishing world. We encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guest and invite everyone to comment on what you hear on the show. Tonight's Lurking for Legends is excited to have with us returning guest, Kate Tilton. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Hi.
We're honored to have you back again. I know everybody loved listening to you last time you were here, and some of the sound advice you gave them. I think a lot of people really appreciate that. But before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kate Tilton. I've been helping authors since 2010. I started as like an author assistant, and now I do a lot more with consultations and kind of like publishing management. So I love everything that's like the business side of books. Um, I love to read books, but like I'm not an editor, I'm not a cover designer. I handle like the business side of things.
So, would you take somebody who's just publishing their first book, and would you walk them through the book launch and other steps that they have to do? So, walk us through the many steps, I'm sure, and you don't have to get too detailed in them because I'm sure you could go on forever, but walk us through the many steps one should take if they're going to publish their first book, like kind of a timeline of events that someone should do months before, weeks before, or however that would work.
Yeah, so I do have a lot of authors that come to me for consultations, and we meet every month to kind of help walk them through the process of publishing their book. Um, Usually, my first conversation is always going to be figuring out how they want to publish. We have the options of traditional publishers, we have indie publishing, and sometimes when people are brand new, they don't really know which one they want to go with. So that's kind of our first conversation. Assuming they want to go the indie route, that is something that I usually work with. So I actually have a spreadsheet that I use that has all the different things from, the creation of the book, from writing the book to going through edits, which that can vary depending on how much edits you need on the book. For example, if you're a brand new author, you might want a developmental edit. If you've been doing this for a while, you might not have a developmental edit anymore, and you might just focus on copy editing. So we have all those steps. We have, again, it kind of depends, like if they're brand new, then we have things like we need to get the website together, signing up on BookBub and Goodreads, getting those profiles together, signing up for all of the accounts they're going to publish on. So if they're going to publish with Amazon, if they're going to publish with Draft to Digital for all the other retailers, if they're going to go direct with those. So there's a lot of steps. I could probably pull up the spreadsheet and go over all of them with you if you want. But it's a lot, which is part of why I do the work that I do, so we can go over it together and figure out, okay, what makes sense for you? How can we break this down so it's not overwhelming?
On that kind of like subject, it's like, so, I mean, there's obviously an awful lot involved with any kind of launch, as we all know, you from your side of it and me and Richard from our side of it. So I was just wondering, it's like, could you kind of like maybe tell us a little bit about what was perhaps your most challenging project you've ever worked on?
Oh, there are so many. Actually, currently it is working with a software called ClickUp. ClickUp is more project management software. So it's something that you see a lot more in bigger businesses. So like most authors, when they're just starting out, something like ClickUp is not necessary. We can just use a spreadsheet. But as an author grows a team of people, then it becomes, okay, we really need to have a centralized place and systems. And that is a challenge. I'm going through this right now with numerous clients at all different degrees. Like some of us, it's just us two on the team. Others, they're big teams. So you have to really write out what's called an SOP, standard operating procedure, for all the things. And I'm sure both of you know this. When you have a launch, right, there might be stuff that you tend to always do, but you might change it up per each launch. So that's where it gets a little bit more like tricky, being like, okay, how do we make something that's like standard, but has enough flexibility that we can add to it or subtract to it as we need? So that's what we're currently working with.
So speaking of launches, would launching the first book in the series differ greatly from launching books 2, 3, or 4 in the series?
It certainly can. For example, when you're launching that first book in a series, you're not going to have other books to then do marketing for. Whereas if you're, book 7 in the series, then the first book you might want to make that free and do promotions around that. You have a lot more to work with. So how you launch can change in that way. Same thing if it's like a new author, right? When you're a new author, you probably don't have things like your website set up yet, a BookBub account, Goodreads account, all the different like retailer platforms. And it's easy to forget when you've actually published that when you're starting, like there's a lot of work to do just for the starting aspect. So does that help?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was just wondering, especially for people who haven't got the extra books in the series yet, what's involved with the difference between book 1 and book 3 in the series per se.
Yeah, and it also depends too if you're like, are you doing print versions? Are you doing audiobook? I have some authors that try to get their audiobook out with their ebook, which is a big undertaking. Wow. So yeah, there's a lot of like pre-planning to make sure, because you have to have basically a final manuscript for your narrators, which means you're pushing out that release, a lot longer. But sometimes that works depending on the release schedule.
Do you see an advantage in holding on to your manuscript to get the audiobook out and releasing them all together? Is there some kind of advantage to doing that?
I don't have the data to really say if I think it's a good idea or not. I think it's something that is fun to, if it's possible, to experiment with and see how that goes. I mean, what's good about that is then, and again, like this is something you'd probably only be doing if you already have a lot of books out and have already built up audiobook readers, because otherwise it wouldn't really make sense. But if you already have established audiobook readers, right, by doing that concurrent release, you're basically saying, like, I value you just as much as my ebook readers. So I think that's probably where the value comes in. So that's why, like, everything that we have, we might have like a standard practice, but then it changes based on, right, the author, their audience, and what other things that they have already done. So
I don't know about Dave, but I know as soon as I get my book ready to go, I want to get it out there. I can't sit on it for, I don't know how people who do traditional publishing can do that, where they sit on the book for like a year or however long they sit on it. I get it out and I want it, it's got to go live. So let's go.
Yeah, I used to try and release like the ebook and the print at the same time.
Yeah, well, definitely, yeah.
But I've kind of like recently I've felt like, well, if one's a couple of weeks behind the other, I'm not too bothered. It's like I don't think it makes a lot of difference long term. But obviously, I wouldn't want to sort of like push it out for kind of like weeks or months, sort of thing.
And I think it really then becomes about the readers. So, if someone's really excited about your book, but they're a print reader and then they can't get your print book, right? That's a disappointment for that reader. So I've seen that. I've had some authors who they have traditional contracts and then they self-publish on the side. So they just kind of put the ebook out and then they do the print whatever they can. And that's a disappointment for me because I don't read ebook. It's just too hard on my eyes. So I'm a paperback reader. And I'm like, I can't get your book. And I know it's been out. And it's been out for a year and I still don't have a paperback. And that's really a shame. So I think there's that element to think about when you're kind of getting into that stage of you've already built up a big network of readers and you want to make sure you're working on retention.
So I'm just curious, what would hold up an author that long to put the print book out? To me, the ebook is ready and then the print book's got a bit more formatting to do because it's a different medium, but in at least mine aren't that fancily formatted, so they're fairly straightforward. I can release both at the same time. What would hold someone back on that?
So in this case, this is not a client of mine. This is just an author that I like her books. And I think it's because she has a traditional contract. So that for her is a priority. And the stuff that she self-publishes is not as big as a priority. I think it's also one, not having help, or having inefficient systems. So if you're, doing formatting with Vellum, right, it's really easy to then have your ebook and print book ready to go. If you're not doing that, right, the print can be a whole other setup. And depending on how you do that, it can be more time consuming. So that's my guess, but it's just speculation.
Well, I see we get a couple questions here. There's one from Hillary Stokes.
Yeah.
Lots of authors still use tactic of first in series as free or significantly discounted. Do you find this is still effective?
Yep. I'm a big fan of having the first book in a series be free, with the caveat of you have to have enough books after that first book. So I even have an author that's doing that right now, and I'm like, we can't make that first book free until we at least have books 2 and 3 and ideally 4 ready to go, because the benefit of having that free book is your read through. So having that first book be free, you can then do a lot of ads to push that free book. It's a very low cost of entry for people, right? Like they're not paying for it. It's really, they're giving up their time. And if they enjoy it, the hope is that they'll then buy the rest of the books in the series. So I find it's really good, especially for authors who are just starting out. So like they don't have a large email list. They don't have a lot of networks yet, because there are plenty. So like, BookBub is a big one, but there's all kinds of other sites that will do the same thing where they email readers of that genre with free books. So it's a good way if you can then like retain those readers. It can be a really good way to kind of start a career.
Do you find that that's actually the same, Kate, for all genres, or is it sort of genre specific?
So far, I haven't seen it not work for a genre. I assume things like, right, if we're talking about nonfiction, that would be a little bit different. But when it comes to fiction, so far, I haven't found a genre that struggles with that.
Interesting.
We've got another question here from Wanda. Hi, Kate. Do you think it's best to have a short synopsis on the back cover, reader endorsements, or both?
So I personally like to have both. I think it's especially, one, it depends if we're talking about just paperback, which I'm assuming we're talking about just paperback. Because right, a hardcover, if you have a jacket, you have more room to play with. But for a paperback, I love for there to be like maybe a cool quote, to start with, or a really catchy kind of like one-liner, and then a short description. I think readers can get really frustrated when the back of the book is just like reader quotes and they don't know what the book is about. So I think a balance of both is the way I would go with that.
Right. So if I'm just, correct me if I'm wrong. So you're saying a catchy quote on the front cover?
On the back. So like...
And this isn't from an endorsement from another author. This is just a quote out of the book?
Yeah, well, I would say a quote from, so like a blurb from an author.
Okay, all right.
Right? I mean, so like this book just has the summary.
Right.
This was the first book in the series, so there weren't any author quotes. If there was, it'd be really cool to have one of those up here and then have the blurb, or to have like a catchy one line that's in bold. Oh, let's see. Yeah, so for example, this one, right? This is a lot bigger and it really catches, so it's kind of just a short description.
So how would a small fry like me go about getting an author quote on the back? Because I know you're trying to snag the biggest fish in the sea as you can, so that it actually grabs people's attention. You go, oh my God, Terry Brooks just mentioned something about Richard Stevens' fantasy. Like that would be a dream for me. But how does one go about getting these things, other than I could get my next door neighbor to do it, but it's not going to mean anything to you.
I'll do one for you, Richard.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, it is asking, and I think a big part of kind of publishing is building up communities. So not just expecting to always take, but to be that person who is always giving. So if you find someone who's newer to fantasy and you can give them a blurb, like, I think that's kind of where it all starts. And this is where another thing that, like, I actually have this in my little checklist, like, get author blurbs. But I always tell authors, like, don't stress about it, because like you might not have had time to build up that community yet. So you might not be able to get those kind of quotes. And like, that's okay. Like all the books I showed you didn't have any blurbs on them. like, or I should author blurbs on them, right? Like they were just the description of the book. But if you get one, right, then it's cool to use it. I've also seen people do like, Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, those kind of reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends if it's a really good one. And then
And
if it's not,
how would one go about getting like a Kirkus review to get on their book before it actually comes out? Or is this something you would add after the fact, just as a second edition or whatever?
So this is where I have lots of authors, right, who are like you, and they just want to like put the book out as soon as it's done. But if it comes to I want to do marketing stuff, right, you actually hold on publishing the books that you're able to get those kind of reviews. So it takes some patience, unfortunately, and money. Kirkus review is something that you pay for as an indie author.
And to anyone who doesn't know, what does a Kirkus review have over? I had this actually I had this happen to me last week. I had a top 100 Amazon reviewer review my book, and I said to my publicist, "What's the difference between him reviewing my book or?" And I'm not picking on Dave at all, but having Dave Kelly review my book, everybody knows Dave Kelly, but I should pick a different name. But having someone, when someone's scrolling through the book on Amazon and they see all these different reviews and they start reading reviews, how do they know that this person's a top 100 reviewer other than Amazon says that? Like, I don't understand the significance of that.
Well, for like Amazon, right, having a review that's from a top reviewer on Amazon is really only helpful for Amazon. Like, you wouldn't want to put that on a book and then try to sell it at Barnes & Noble. They're going to be like, we don't want that. We don't want to promote our competitor. Whereas, right, having a review from a fellow author, like that would be something that you could use on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo. You could use it everywhere. So that's the big difference, I would say. As for like how Amazon determines the top reviewers, I think it's actually, this is my guess, like I don't know for sure, but my guess is it's the like number of reviews that person does, and also how many of their reviews are rated positively, because you can rate a review if it's helpful or not helpful. So my guess is they take those factors in, and that's how they make their top list. So it's super cool to get it. It's just not something you're going to stick on an actual print book, because then you can't use the print book elsewhere.
Right.
Oh, and then the other thing you asked was like Kirkus and those kind of things. Those are editorial sites. So I'm not going to say like those are the absolute end all. You have to have them. But I've had some like newer authors who they're just like, I really want to have something from a kind of authority that says my book is good. So for them, it was really important to get one, and then we used it in the marketing.
And you find that effective, obviously.
I mean, you can use it in so many different ways. I've also found if you get a BookBub, right, BookBub tends to have really good copy editors. So they'll write like a short description of the book. I keep those in a file, and I use them when I'm pitching the book, because it's like, cool, I need, a couple sentence description of this book. This is one that's really going to catch people. So I use whatever I get.
Kate, one of the things that we hear a lot about is newsletter subscribers. So could you maybe talk about any tips you have for kind of like building up newsletter subscribers, and perhaps more importantly, actually being able to keep hold of them once you got them?
Yeah, I could talk about newsletters all the time, because I love newsletters, right? Newsletters are a direct connection to your reader, or someone who's potentially interested in being your reader. So I think one of the first things is it's always nice to be able to offer people something when they sign up that is something that you wrote, because, right, if they haven't yet read any of your books, that gives them something, usually like a short story novella, right? It gives them a taste of your writing, so they can see, do I like this person's writing or do I not? So that's one of the things I really love. It also gives you the benefit of, if you offer that as like they sign up and the first email they get from you is, here's the link to go download this novella on BookFunnel, you're getting a click on that. And that shows the computers like, hey, this person is sending emails that people want because they're clicking on it. So that's really good. In terms of actually like retaining readers, right? You're storytellers, tell stories. I think it's very easy to get kind of overwhelmed when you look at like a list of 100 people and be like, I don't know who I'm talking to. So I think it's really important to narrow that down to like, who is your number one ideal reader, and then write stories for that person. Because it doesn't matter how big the list is, right? The idea is they're all going to be similar in what they're looking for. So if you write to that one person, it kind of helps get rid of that overwhelm. So that's kind of where I would start when it comes to newsletters. And also making sure that if you're offering something like a newsletter, short story, or novella when they sign up, put that in your books. I also put them in the front and the back of the book. You know, sign up for Dave Kelly's newsletter, you know, or VIP email list, and we'll send you an exclusive short story, plus other cool, you know, stories and bonuses, and make it a compelling offer. That's not just sign up for my newsletter. Like why? Why should I sign up? So I think that's another thing, is working on the copy editing there.
You know, with regards to newsletters, as far as providers, do you find one provider more advantageous than another, as like MailChimp or MailerLite, or do you find one that you use or go to that you recommend to authors more than others?
So usually I recommend MailerLite to authors. You know, they have a free plan that you can start with. They have really good automation features. The one thing that I don't love as much about MailerLite as ConvertKit is being able to segment people. It's totally possible on MailerLite. It's just a little bit more steps involved. But ConvertKit is very expensive. They do have a free option now, but it's limited. So for most authors, I'm like, start with MailerLite. If you then have a list of, 50,000 people and really need to get into segmenting, like, then look at something that's more advanced like ConvertKit. But for most authors, like, you don't start there.
Sorry, what's that one called? ConvertKit?
ConvertKit.
I never heard of that one. I use MailChimp, but we just use it because we can have up to 2,000 email subscribers before we have to pay for it.
Yeah. So, and MailChimp used to be the go-to.
Yeah.
And then they made a lot of changes. They're trying to become more of a marketing platform overall. So they're not my favorite anymore.
Right.
Also, deliverability wise, like if you look up deliverability reports, you can see like who the top people are. Usually ConvertKit and MailerLite are pretty high up there. So that tends to be where, but like I said, like I love ConvertKit. It's also very expensive. So I only use it for clients who, like, we need to do some serious segmenting, because when you have 50,000 people on your list, you can't send out one email to all those people at once. You really have to customize it and break it down. But you don't start there. So MailerLite is usually my recommendation. And I have people with very big lists on MailerLite as well, who they're like, we don't really need to segment as much because we're not doing, for example, right? Like I have one author that has numerous pen names. So there's a lot of segmenting that happens just with the pen names. But like if you have one genre, one pen name, you might do a lot less of the segmenting. So MailerLite is usually my go-to for starting.
Very interesting. Wanda's asking how often, and this is a question we get a lot too, is how often do you think a newsletter should be sent out? Like you don't want to, in my mind, you don't want to badger the people on there, and yet you don't want them to lose interest either. So what's the
every
idea?
day?
What's the
Not
idea?
every day.
Or is it, and does it differ by genre?
That makes me wonder, because I'm like, there probably is someone who gets away with sending an email every day. That makes me wonder, because I know, like, was it Seth Godin I think he sends this pretty frequently. Anyway, I like to see authors sending it at least once a month, but ideally more than that. And this is the thing, right? It's like frequency will not matter if the content is not good. So we have to make sure we're sending good content, because if we just start sending more emails, but they're not good, that's going to backfire on us. But if we get to the point where we're sending emails that people are wanting to engage with, sending more gives you more flexibility, because we talk about in marketing, like an 80-20 ratio of like 80% not sales and 20% sales. So if you're only sending once a month, that's 12 emails. So you have a lot less that's going to be sales oriented. If you're sending twice a month, right? Like that doubles the number. So it makes it a lot easier to put the sales information in there without making your newsletter seem like this is always just about buying stuff. So I have some people that send more than twice a month because they have a lot going on. We still do storytelling. Like I have one author who does newsletters that are written from her dog. Like he's the one who's writing the story. And like it's really fun. It's unique, and readers, right? Because she's writing romantic comedy, so it fits in with the genre. So,
and that's one thing I wanted to touch on too. Is so as far as content goes, I know we spoke a little bit on it a bit earlier, but how would you construct an effective newsletter to go out? Like, you don't want to bombard them with buy this, buy this, buy this. Obviously, just that's not going to grab their attention. So what else would you structure inside a newsletter to make it compelling for someone to actually read to the actual hook?
So I mean, obviously, it really depends on your readership. But like I've seen people who, instead of just saying like, here's a sales email about my upcoming release, they instead tell a funny story that inspired something in the book. So it's like, I went on this trip to the Swiss Alps and, I stumbled across this thing and then I thought, oh, that'd be a great idea for a mystery. So like, that's the email. So it's a much softer pitch for going and buying the book than just hey, I have a new book out. Here are the links. Right? Like it's more compelling to have that story of like, okay, what did you uncover and how did your thought process go for this story? So I've seen that a lot, and I love that idea of like doing something that's more fun than just here's a release announcement. I love that, Wanda. Dragon writing Richard's newsletters. Like,
I don't think I worked too long. It probably burned my computer.
I've seen like people do having their characters do like a if they were having a cell phone chat conversation, right, back and forth. And I really like this idea for series where you have like spin-offs, so it could be both main characters. So like main character from series 1, main character from series 2, having a conversation back and forth. So that way you're telling the readers, hey, like these are connected, even if you can read them both separately. And it's more engaging. So it's like if you're going to write dialogue, right? It makes it more, instead of thinking about it like this is a newsletter, which is part of why I lean towards saying email list instead of newsletter, because it doesn't have to be just news. It can be, here's a fun story, or one of the things I talked to one of my clients about the other day. Earlier last year, my car was hit by a basketball hoop, which is just one of those weird things that happens. And we're dealing with insurance and all this. She writes shifters, right? Romance, paranormal romance, like wolf shifters, all different kinds of shifters. And I'm like, what if instead of hitting a basketball hoop, I hit a shifter? Like, could you imagine trying to do the insurance claim on that? I'm like, it's just, like, that's a good idea for a newsletter, right? Like, that's funny and engaging. And it's part of also how we think as writers, right? Is like something you see and it sparks those ideas of what if. So putting that into a newsletter can make really engaging content. Yeah.
And something that I've seen a few places now is people saying that you shouldn't actually call them newsletters because that puts people off. Is that the same in your experience, would you say?
So I'm not like opposed to using newsletters, but as I mentioned, I will sometimes just change it to saying like my VIP email list, mostly because I want the authors to stop getting into the thought process of I can only send news. So if I have no new book out, I can't send an email, because that's not the point. The point is I'm connecting and engaging with an audience, right, with readers. It would be like if you were going to a party and every time you went to the party, you just said, hey, I published a book. Like, no one's going to want to talk to you if that's all you do when you're at a party.
Is that
Now,
is that why?
I was going to say the same thing. No wonder no one talks to me.
Right, but like people then do that on social media, and they do it in their newsletters, and then they wonder why they're not getting that connection. It's because you're not having conversation with people. You're just telling them, here's stuff that happened. And again, it's not to say like it's bad to mention a new release. It's just more about changing the mindset into thinking of, this is a way I'm directly connecting with my readers and having conversations with them. So that might be, I'm going to ask them a poll about what their favorite thing is. And that might be something that's not related to my book, or it might be, hey, I want to give my main character a quirk about what soda they like. So I'm going to have you vote, should it be Coke or Sprite? Like, that's a really cool, easy thing to do. But then the readers feel like they're part of the creation of the book without, right, giving them like a major plot twist control, right? So I think it's just something to have more fun with.
A little bit like Richard with him inviting people to name his dragons.
Mm-hmm. Like, that's fun. I would like to name a dragon.
Well, you know what? You can just email me or go on my Facebook author page, and you can put a suggestion there, and we'll write it down. And who knows? I always tell people they don't have to be fancy names. They just can't be names like Smog or whatever the names are, the Game of Thrones dragons. And it's funny, people will try to put those names in. And I said, well, George R. R. Martin's already got that, so I probably can't get away with it.
Yeah, but like that would be a really fun email campaign, right? Because thinking of it as your newsletter subscribers, right, your email list, they are the people that are closer to you than anything else. So I think we talked about this last time, right? Instead of looking at marketing as a funnel where everyone who finds out about the book buys the book, we look at it in terms of heat. So your hottest circle is your repeat buyers. The circle outside of that is your first-time buyer. The circle outside of that is your email list. And a lot of times, right, that email list is also your first-time buyers and your repeat buyers. So, and then social media is outside of that, right? So that's kind of my thing with a lot of authors that I talk to, right? Like, they come thinking that they need Facebook ads and all this stuff. And like, it's not that those are bad, but we really need to focus on how do we connect with readers.
So we have another question from Hillary.
Hillary.
And she asks, in this age of Zoom calls, do you have any tips for people who hate seeing their face on screen?
I think
are there any ways to make it more comfortable?
I think a lot of it is practice. Like, I don't like being on the stage. Horrible stage fright. I'm much better with doing podcasts and doing like video interviews, but even that is still like, okay, gonna take a deep breath and do that. I have found that sometimes I'm like really nervous before I do something that's like a video call. Actually doing like those power poses and some deep breathing helps. I know it sounds kind of contrite, but like it has helped. But really a lot of it is practice, and also I think balancing it out. If you know you're not comfortable with Zoom calls, try not to schedule a bunch in one day. Kind of break it down so you can build up that, okay, if I can get through one, right, tomorrow I can get through another one, instead of like burning yourself out doing a bunch at once.
Thanks, Kate. Personally, I think wearing a mask is always an option.
Oh yeah,
I am today.
I was actually going to say that, like, depending on your brand, right? Like, depending on what you're writing, you could get away with that. Like if you're writing something really comedic, like I know an author who wears a chicken mask. I know a video game creator who you never see his face. He has this custom mask that looks like kind of this moon thing. And like, he never does interviews without that mask. We've never seen his face. So that's an option, depending on where you're going with your writing.
So he's the Mandalorian, is he?
Basically,
Yeah.
just much weirder.
So you touched basically on Facebook ads. How much do you do that with your clients? Is that something that you look after as well, or is that just something that you advise them to do, or get? Where would you send them if they're, because ads are daunting, and Amazon ads. If you take Brian Cohen's course, he will get you feeling a little bit more comfortable with getting the simple ads out there, but you still haven't mastered them. Facebook ads are a whole nother thing altogether. So how do you handle that with your clients?
I don't. And for a lot of reasons, right? My focus with marketing has always been focusing on humans. So the human-centered marketing, which is why I talk a lot about email lists, and even social media in general. But when it comes to things like ads, right, it's constantly changing. So again, I'm never going to say oh, it's not helpful, because I have people who have used them to great success. But usually people who use that to great success are people who have already just established a lot of books. They already have a reader base. They're good at retaining readers, right? They get them on their newsletter and they retain them. So something like a Facebook ad just kind of gives them more visibility. And the problem I see is a lot of authors that come to me usually don't have that level built up, but they've been hearing do Facebook ads, do Amazon ads, spend all this money. And I'm like, wait, first we need to make sure you have enough books out. We need to make sure you know how to talk to your readers, so that way when you find a reader, right, you're keeping them. So yes, visibility is a challenge for authors, but it's not the only challenge. I think it's just the one we tend to focus on. But even recently, I have some clients that do use Facebook ads, and now we're seeing a lot of changes because of privacy, right? New privacy laws that are getting passed. And they're like, I now can't find things to target because everything is being basically shut down. And that's why I'm like, that's kind of what I saw as an issue, which is why I've never focused on that or encouraged authors to be like, yeah, you need to do Facebook ads. It's you can. It might be helpful, but no, you're not required to. So, yeah, I don't do them.
So what about promotions then? I know they're kind of ads as well, but they're not quite the same. So Book Squirrel and all those Book Barbarian and all those different places.
So if we're talking about promotions that we're doing, like BookBub, Free Booksy, that kind of thing, right, where you have a book that's free. Again, for me, my goal for that is I want those people on my email list. So that way I can then communicate with them, build a relationship with them, so that they're more willing to be buying the rest of the books in the series. So that's why I am a big fan of, okay, I have enough books out, making that first book free, and then once a month doing one of those promotions to be bringing in, right, the visibility aspect. But again, it's going to be more effective if you're good at retaining people. So making sure that first book has a good pitch for your newsletter list, making sure it has an excerpt of the next book in the series that's easy for them to follow and buy the next book. And the same thing for that book. It's kind of basic maintenance, but I see a lot of people just stop doing it because they're so busy trying to write new books. But it is important. It really does help with that read through.
Yeah, so Free Booksy is they have other places too that you can promote, and it doesn't have to necessarily be free. And do you recommend authors do that as well? Like the Book Squirrel. I'm just trying to. I know all these names, and now I can't think of them as I'm talking to you here. But there's so many different sites out there. Fussy Librarian, and where you can discount your book as much as you want, and then they will feature it for a certain price. Do you find that effective or not?
So it depends on what your goal is. So I've seen authors who, right, they set a goal of, I want to hit the USA Today list. In that case, the book has to be something that's paid, right? And then doing those kind of promotions all at once during that week, doing swaps, newsletter swaps with authors that you know right? Like you're putting everything into it to sell as many copies as possible to try to get on the list. Like that is a strategy. It's not a strategy you're going to use when you're just starting out, but it is one that I see when authors are like, okay, I have a good shot at this, I'm going to do it.
So then stack the promotions all over, a short period of time.
And that's only if you're trying to get onto the USA Today bestseller list. Because, right, how those lists work is they're taking account the sales from this chunk of time. Totally spacing on it. I want to say it's Monday through Sunday. So
and where do they draw those numbers from? Straight off of Amazon, or do they draw them off of like how would USA Today compile a list like that? If I'm solely on Amazon or if I'm wide, how would USA Today compile those numbers?
So that's kind of the benefit of USA Today versus New York Times, is that USA Today takes it from everywhere. Although I am pretty sure that you have to have sales in places that are not just Amazon to be hitting that list. The New York Times list is kind of weird how they do it. Like they take bookstore reports from certain bookstores that you don't know which bookstore it is. They're also an editorial list. So you could have an author who sells enough copies to be on the list, but the New York Times doesn't put them on the list. So that's one of the reasons why I'm just talking about the USA Today list, because as an indie author, you can make it on that list. As an indie author, it's very unlikely you're going to hit that New York Times list.
Right.
Which is good to know, because...
And something that I've seen and on several places, several groups and so on recently, is people are saying that things like BookBub promotions, Book Barbarian, so on, that they used to be very successful, but now they're not. Is this something that you've seen? Is there a general downturn, or is it just like affecting certain authors in certain areas, or what?
So I haven't seen like a significant downturn in effectiveness, but I think there's different things that come into play. Like one, how much you're promoting the same book, because right, if we had a BookBub one month, and this wouldn't happen, but say we have a BookBub the next month in the same book, like there hasn't been enough time for BookBub to grow a bunch of new readers. So like obviously we tend to see the most results on that first one because it's fresh. The second one tends to be really good still because one, there's been time in between, so BookBub's had time to grow more readers to the list, but also people who might have missed that first time it was run might get it the second time. So I think, right, there's always going to be kind of some diminishing returns. It's just, is it diminishing enough to make it not worth doing? And I don't think I've seen that happen for authors that I've worked with yet. But also, right, where we space things out.
So I've seen people who've said that, like for instance, BookBub, they the first kind of like few times they've won BookBub promotions, they've kind of like kind of clearly sort of made the cost of the promotion back again and more. But more recently, I've been seeing people saying like they're barely kind of like breaking even, and in some cases actually not making anything. They're making a loss.
Yeah. And this is why it's really important to track your data, because you won't know if it's going to be that way for you unless you track your own data. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen to authors, like it certainly can, but there's so many other factors that are involved with things. Like, right, if you're doing a BookBub on a free book, the way you're making your money is then on sales of the other books. So if your offer is not as compelling to get those readers, right, you might see that kind of loss there. And also just, I guess, I think looking at the genre, like how well your book stacks up against other books in that genre. So it's so important to just be tracking your data, so that way you can see if that happens. I'm the same way with read through. If you track your general read through and you see like, hey, between book 5 and book 6, tons of people drop off, like it might be time to go back and look at book 5 and see, like, did you kill a character off that maybe you shouldn't have killed off? Did the ending not really lead into book 6 well enough? You might need to switch things around for romance authors, where they have a series that's kind of it's a series, but right, like you don't have to read it in chronological. There's not a chronological order to it, right? Like it might be, okay, I'm gonna make book 7 book 5 because it sells through better that way, and I don't have to worry about timeline because that's not a thing in this kind of loose series. So yes, big on tracking data. I know it can be a pain, but it really matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough being a bean counter sometimes when you're an author, especially an independent author. You have so many hats you have to wear.
But that's why people work with people like me who will help them keep track of those things.
And that's what I wanted to get to now. So we're out of time, and we're going to close it off in a minute. But if somebody wants to take advantage of your services, how would they get a hold of you?
So my website is katetilton.com. You can set up a consultation with me through my website there, and I would love to help you.
Awesome. And David's posted that. It says my name, but it's David's posted that for you. So, and so the initial consultation, is that just you're going to speak to the author and see if you guys are a good fit, or is it something like, when you're trying to hire a prospective editor? How does that work with you?
So my consultations are paid, just as my schedule, it's necessary. But that first consultation is really, it's a chance to pick my brain about anything.
Right.
So for some people, right, when they're new, like we actually need to do monthly consultations so that I can help teach them and walk them through the publishing process. For other people, it might be as simple as I'm just stuck and I need someone that understands publishing to walk me through this and like get me out of my own head. So I've done that with clients. And then I've had them, like, I haven't heard from them for years and they come back when they're stuck again. I love it all. But it's always like, you should always leave a consultation with clarity of what I'm going to do next. Like that is always my goal, is I don't want you leaving a call feeling overwhelmed. And I've had people that cried on my calls, like, and I'm like, that's my goal is to get you past that into, okay, I know what I'm going to do next. And, if I need follow-ups, like I'm there for follow-ups and it'll be okay.
And one last thing for me, Kate, if you had one key piece of advice for authors, what would it be?
You got this. I think it's really important to take a breath and, to realize you don't have to do every single thing that you hear about. So it's okay to experiment with things, track it, and see how it feels for you. But your journey is going to be different than everyone else's, and that is okay.
Thanks, Kate.
No, that's
You're
great
welcome.
advice. So anything new with you, Dave, before we sign off here?
No, apart from I need to go and revamp my entire newsletter.
You can do it.
I'm going to send mine to you.
There's great resources out there.
I'll send mine to you too, Dave. You can do mine as well.
Okay, thanks.
As far as me, I'm still just working away at Windwalker, book 3 in the Highcliffe Guardian series, and I'm revamping the covers on the Rika's Flight series, which is something I didn't think I'd ever do, but we're already on Rika's Legacy book 3, so I'm quite excited to work with my new cover designer. It's so much fun seeing them bring your characters to life. But so anyway, thank you again,
Richard.
Kate,
just on that, what prompted the change?
I wanted to be more consistent. So as far as branding goes, I want the typography to match, and I also want the artwork to be more similar per se, because I've got an artist who's drawn everything from scratch, and then I've got another one where they take a model in costume clothing and they superimpose her on the back of a screen. And as beautiful as the covers are on their own, they don't match together. They're different trilogies, but they're all in the same epic fantasy universe. So I want to get my branding a little bit more online. So that's the only thing. And it's not cheap doing it, but I think in the long run, it's probably, it should pay off in the end, because then people will actually identify it. And we just had Ronnie Lane say, great job, Kate, as usual.
Thank you.
Anyway, thanks again, Kate, for joining us. And again, we'd love to have you on maybe later on in the year, and we can discuss some more new things in the industry and other things that you can offer authors. So
Sounds good.
Next week's guest is Candace J. Carter. Candace is a mystery author and photographer based in South Carolina, Midlands. From growing up in a one-horse town, literally, to working for the National Park Service, she's walked many paths in life. She's always shared a love for Western movies with her father. Her stories reflect small-town life and the feeling of family shared by people in rural communities. So thanks to her father, there's a bit of Old West in her stories, too. She's now retired and reconnecting with her inner cowboy, so that should be interesting. Because of who David and I are, we get a lot of fantasy and science fiction people here, so it'll be a nice break to have a totally different genre here. So we're going to have to, I'm going to have to dig deep to ask questions of this genre that I know nothing else. So for Dave and myself, we hope that everybody has an amazing week. Until we meet again, take good care.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.